once again, my name is Chris Adams. I'm the president of Balancing Act, and we've been doing budget engagement now since, I guess, 2007 was the first online budget simulation that we made, and we've been doing public engagement since 1997. We're really delighted to be able to speak with all of you. This is a group that's mostly California, I think actually all California at this point, which I think is great. And the idea for today, these are the folks that signed up for this. I think we had a little bit of an errant email, and I think we got a few extra beyond California who were invited to this. We still welcome them, but I think they might be sorting themselves out into their own state roundtables. The agenda for today is really intended to be awfully simple. It's just to discuss what challenges you are seeing this budget season and the strategies that you're thinking of to address them. We're going to share a little bit about what we're hearing nationally in terms of budget engagement, so that we can, just kind of let you all learn from what's going on in the rest of the country and even the rest of the world a little bit, and then have a discussion and adjourn. And like I said, we're not going to take up too much of your time, but did want to just cover these items. So I'd really love it. These are when you all signed up, we asked you what challenges you're facing. And I'd love it if you all could just kind of share what you're thinking. This is what you said in writing, but if you wouldn't mind going off of mute, if you would, and just introducing yourself, and then just saying what challenge you're foreseeing with regards to the budget. Or sometimes we ask, what is it that you wish your residents understood about your budget? So I don't know, Shannon, I see that you're off mute, so maybe you could start.
Sure. I'm seeing like the screen what everybody else has, and it's pretty much the same issue. But I know our goal really is going to hopefully to get the community to understand like what a small percentage of our budget is truly kind of discretionary versus what's fixed. Right. So how can we focus on the things, that we have some where the competing priorities are, that we have some kind of option for. So whether it's enhanced services above the minimum, or how much do we want to spend on homeless, initiatives, community development. A lot of what we're hearing too is how we prioritize our ARPA funds and how that's actually going to the community in order to strengthen neighborhoods and neighborhood types of initiatives. Right. So demonstrating the things we are doing with those funds as well.
Oh, that's really helpful, and you're not alone in having those challenges. Stephanie or Shona, are you able to go off mute and just say a little bit about what challenges you're seeing?
Hi, this is Shawna from Paso Robles. I'm guessing my answer would be different from the electeds or the city manager. The reason I'm attending today is to get some effective outreach tactics for engagement, increased engagement.
Interesting. And say a little bit more about that, because I'm always curious. So you said different, but usually there's a breakdown between professional staff and electeds, that there's often different goals or objectives or challenges. But it sounds like you're seeing one among the professional staff between the city manager and maybe are you with the budget office, Shauna?
No, I'm strictly community engagement. Oh, and the reason that I said that they might have different answers is that I have not been included in the initial budget conversation for this next round. We're having our budget and goal setting workshop for next year at the end of this month. So I was hoping to get, some good ideas on outreach, just to make sure. We've seen a little bit of decrease in participation with hybrid meetings, maybe just Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, right.
So I just want to make sure that I'm using, all the tools available to get people to participate.
I understand. What are some of the challenges that Paso Robles has?
Probably the same as everyone in California. Really high cost of living. The cost of housing is really high in our area. In our county, we're on the lower end of our county, but the employment in our city is service-based for the most part. We're agricultural and tourism, so there's a lot of service jobs, and the housing is really tight. we just broke ground on the first housing development since 2007, and it's only 71 units in the first phase. And so we have two really large projects that will end up being 3,000 units, but they're both still, they're entitled, but they're just having trouble finding contractors to take on the project.
Interesting.
Specifically, I think because of the cost of building.
Wow, very interesting. We've actually, we're doing an awful lot of work. The Association of Bay Area Governments actually bought a bulk license of balancing act simulation that we modified for use with housing. And I'll do a quick little demo of that towards the end of today. So thank you for sharing that. And it's always nice. Not that many governments actually have a person that's dedicated to community engagement. So it's really nice to make your acquaintance.
Yeah, and one other quick thing in case
Yeah.
anyone on the call is on the same. It sounds like you were talking about this earlier. We passed a measure, a sales tax measure. So we have funds that will be going specifically to roads and public safety. And similarly, it freed up some general fund monies to be moved into other places. So we'll be figuring out how to use those. And like I said, I'm not in on the budget conversations that say finance and city manager have had. So I don't know what their actual literal priorities might be this budget session, but I do want to know what tools are available to us to make it successful.
Right. Oh, that's great. We're actually doing a project with the city of Austin, Texas that might be interesting for you. We've taken the dollars off of one of our tools, and you just sort of prioritize strategic goals, and they're using it at very high levels in the city of Austin. I think they might actually share it with the public later this year. So thank you for that. And then Stephanie, I see you're on mute. I don't know if you have a microphone on your computer or not, but it'd be great to hear from you too.
We've the city's had similar challenges as the others that spoke of. I think the hardest one was getting citizens fully involved in the budget process and for them to understand how funding works. That's a hard one to sell and to educate, because they see what they see in the city, but they want it done yesterday. You know, and it's hard for us because, as you all know, is when it comes to funding, there's limitations, there's requirements, there's a process to get the funding if it's brand new funding, especially if it's grants. So that piece, I think our citizens could do for some education on those particular areas.
Right. Oh, that's really good. And then Stephanie, I'm going to be touching on this point later, but I'm going to say that Moreno Valley, and you've been the person I've been working with at Moreno Valley since I think 2015 or 2016. You're one of our oldest clients and one of the very first adopters. And one of the things that GFOA is doing right now is they're really starting to push this idea of institutionalizing budget engagement. It's making it just a part of how government does its business. And you know, we have some clients that kind of come in one year and then they go out another year and then maybe they come back again. But you've really been studied just doing this as just a part of the way that your office does business. I'm just wondering if you'd comment on that, about how it's just become a part of what you do.
Right. We were looking in, well, as far as the engagement portion, we were looking at that just prior to us partnering with your organization, trying to find out of the box ways of approaching engagement. And that's when we did our research. Of course, we saw your company and were impressed on your processes and how the programming educates our citizens. And because when you're in finance and you try to explain something, sometimes we forget that we're speaking a different language, you know, or something they're not familiar with. So that's what we loved about this program, is it was something the citizens can go into. They can click on various things, they can see different scenarios. But that was what was attractive to our organization, was trying to reach the citizen in a different way. And we're still working on that, because when we go through budget process, we do our best to get the the public, for the public to know that this is out there, this tool's out there to help them understand things better as we go through the budget process. So when we have those public forums or meetings, they're either prepared at the meeting or just before the meeting because they went into this program and can engage our staff and our city council on areas they think that are of importance to the community. So.
No, that's great. That's great. And we're really glad for our longstanding connection with Moreno Valley. So thanks for being on today. Anything else just by way of challenges that you guys are facing and trying to deal with?
Our biggest challenge, of course, you know, with the cost of living, we're primarily, you know, we're warehouse driven here. We're not really a tourist destination. So trying to promote local businesses, look into promoting small businesses. We have a workforce development center that works with both the community as well as the businesses to get them qualified candidates to go into their workforce in their organization. Our primary goal, of course, is we have incentive programs. It's called Hire Move Out, where businesses are given an incentive to hire Movale residents, have them with them for so long, and they get a small stipend from that, as well as hiring veterans. We have a Hire Vet program that does a similar thing where they hire veterans, especially since March Air Reserve Base is so close to us. So we do have a military community that comes in and out, and eventually a lot of them end up moving here. So we have those types of programs to help businesses find qualified candidates, because as we've heard in the press, you know, certain businesses are having a hard time finding staff to, you know, hire staff into their organization. So that's why we're not only creating incentives for the businesses, and that also helps them get motivated in another way to find creative ways to get candidates. That's why it's we like our workforce development center, because that's where one of their primary focuses is to work with businesses to help find them the candidates that they need to help run their businesses, because as everybody knows, you know, you can go into a certain store or whatever, and the shelves are not as plentiful as they used to be, but some of it is, you know, supply and demand, but it's also staffing to stock those shelves. So that's one of our challenges here in the city of Moreno Valley that we're working on.
That's great. That's really good to hear that. Well, all right, let's we'd asked Andrew, so he's the director of administrative services for City of Healdsburg. They're one of our newer clients, and I just have to tell you that our staff they keep on saying, gosh, you should see what they're doing in Healdsburg. It's really cool. And I have not really seen too much of it. And so, you know, whenever we do these roundtables, we typically just ask one client if they would just say a little bit about what they're doing, kind of do a little show and tell. So I asked Andrew if he would. And so, Andrew, if it's okay with you, I'm going to turn the screen over to you, and you can kind of share with these other California cities what you're up to.
Sure, and thank you, Chris, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share. Just by way of background, I joined the City of Healdsburg about almost a year ago, about the same time a new city manager joined just a month before. And we also have what has been a recently transitioned council, where we have 3 fairly new city council members. City of Healdsburg is a small city of about 12,000 residents in northern Sonoma County. And there is a lot of participant citizen engagement in our local government, has historically been, continues to be, with a lot of diverse opinions about what the city should be doing and focusing its resources. And so as the new city manager and I both came in and started thinking about how do we prepare for our next 2-year budget cycle, which we run a 2-year budget, which will start in July of this year. We really wanted to rethink how the city engaged the public on the budget process. And historically, what we had done to engage the public on our budgeting process was the city council meetings in which we talked about the budget with the council and ultimately got a vote, and a single paper-based survey that we sent out once a year that wasn't specific to the entire budget. It was specific to a subset of funds we had received as a result of a sales tax measure about a decade ago. And the questions on the survey were to the tune of, you know, prioritize the following for me in terms of what you think is most important: police, fire, economic development, housing. Where would you like to see more money spent? Police, fire, economic development, housing. So we do the survey every year, and we spend quite a bit of money mailing it out to folks and then, you know, hand tabulating the responses, and it was meaningless. There was no real data or information. But we'd get 1,000 responses every year on 12,000 residents. So people were doing it. People wanted to be engaged. And no one really complained that the survey was bad until I looked at it and I was like, this is terrible. What do we do? How are we spending our time and money on this? So we really wanted to rethink how we did public engagement for the budget process this year. And we came across this tool, and after getting a demo and actually talking to a couple other cities that folks on Chris's team referred me to, I thought it was the right move for us to move forward. And so we just actually started out building our simulation about a month ago. It hasn't launched to the public yet. It's launching next Friday, but I'm happy to share it with you today. We have the English version of the simulation completely ready to go, minus a video that we're still editing to put in the front. But I'll go ahead and share my screen now and get that started. So this should bring you to the, this is kind of the back end where we've been building it. And I'll just say that, you know, as a customer, one of the things I really appreciate about this tool is how easy it is to input the data you need and make changes. We've been going back and forth between previewing and then editing frequently, particularly with our department heads as we started sharing it with them. But our actual survey simulation at this point looks like this. This is the pop-up screen we'll have show up at the beginning, and we've got a video that we shot this week with our mayor, which is kind of similar to the one in the Balancing Act demo, but a little different language and Healdsburg focus that will be placed in this text box here. So as people come, they'll have it. We had him produce the video in both English and Spanish. So our English version of the survey will have him giving that video in English, and the Spanish version will have it in Spanish, which is really important to us. About 30% of our residents are Latinx, and they're becoming a much more engaged part of our population when it comes to city services. And we actually have a local nonprofit who's helping us get the word out to them and committed to at least 400 responses from the Latinx community, which we're pretty excited about. So they'll go through this, and then the screen comes up. We're asking some initial questions, and we thought a lot about the questions we wanted to ask and how we wanted to ask them. So on this first screen, we are really asking the respondents to do 3 things: tell us that they live here, tell us if they work here, and they can answer yes to both or no to both, and then the zip code, which I love this feature because we only have one zip code in Healdsburg, and it pops up the map pretty quickly, and you can zoom in and just drag over your neighborhood and let us know where you live. And for us, that's important because we have some neighborhoods that have very different perspectives on what's important to them when it comes to city services, and being able to pull this data out and kind of see how respondents answered at the end of the day based on neighborhood was a really cool feature that I liked. Part I'm excited about is our actual budget. And so we have combined, and this is for you finance folks, the hardest part of this, I think, for a finance person is thinking about how you create this survey in a way that helps the public see all the services that the city actually offers without getting too caught up in the fund sources and all the limitations and rules we have on how the money goes from place A to place B. And so for our survey, we've got about, I think about $50 million displayed in the current simulation, but our total budget's about $89 million. So we included our general fund, our community services fund. I included portions of our utility funds to cover the activities that they fund and pay for. And I just kind of came to terms with the fact that, look, if somebody's going to increase money one place and increase revenue another place to balance it, they're never going to learn or care about whether or not that's an appropriate use of funds and where that money's coming from. But the feedback of knowing what's important to them and where they're willing to sacrifice paying more is important to me. And so we built the survey with that in mind, that like not to worry about all the accounting rules and more to worry about what kind of feedback are we getting from the residents. And so we built the categories of spending all based on kind of the types of services we provide the residents, not on this is funded here, that's funded there, but kind of categories of spending. And so, in our public safety category, for example, it's police and fire are lumped in here, but they're separate line items. We have a pretty large project. We're building a fire substation next year, so we built that into the model to let folks see that that's a project on the pipeline. Where it gets a little more exciting for us is in our community services budget's pretty nicely funded for most cities because we have a good amount of transient occupancy tax coming in. But this is where we started taking advantage of the question tools. We have a deferred maintenance issue with a lot of our city facilities on the community services side. So we're asking folks like, hey, how much more do you want us to spend a year on this? You complain about the facilities. We have the money. How much of our money should we dedicate towards this next year? So we've given them some options, and obviously they can comment if they don't like any of them, and tell us that as well. On the planning and building side, we've got some needs. We have the south entry of town that definitely needs a specific plan soon in the next couple of years, and there's a strong interest from some council members and some members of the community in doing that. So the reality is it's expensive. So we're trying to get a sense from folks of, okay, we know we need to do this. How much are you willing to put aside a year, and how long are you willing to wait to get to be able to fund that? So the question isn't, do you want to fund it all now? Although in theory they could tell us that. The question is more about asking them to think about how much of our next year's budget funds are they willing to set aside to help get us there in the future. Same thing with the general fund, the general plan. We've got a huge interest in two groups in our community want to see us start working on our general plan update now, which is obviously it's a big endeavor, and we don't just have $2 million sitting around to do that. So the question again is, how much are you willing to spend now? What sacrifice are you willing to make in the budget? How long are you willing to wait to get started? So we're really hoping that questions like these will give us some feedback around, not just those groups who are often the vocal groups that come to the council meetings and make those comments, but as a community as a whole, what do folks think? And we've been, I love the fact that we can add details in the questions and also in the comments here and explain, what that part of the organization does and how they function. For the police and fire, for example, we actually put you're paying for 16 sworn police officers and 6 dispatchers. And so being able to give the residents that kind of information and educate them on where the money is being spent as well has been really nice. The other one that's been really interesting for us, I think, is this category. And so this is our utilities. We're calling it utilities, resources, and sustainability. But we've got a pretty strong contingent of folks who are very focused on climate and the environment. And so we really wanted to focus in on what are the core issues around that and what our current spending is. One of the things we hear frequently is that folks don't feel like we're spending enough on issues like water supply or climate change. And what they don't realize is they're just not seeing it, or it's not easily visible to them. And part of that's shame on us for not telling a better story. But part of it is kind of what does it actually take to fund clean water system and fund our existing operations and do capital projects around water supply. And so we actually built in this section portions of our water funds budget, our electric utilities budget, our resource conservation, which is actually a combination of pieces of multiple budgets, and then our open space management program, which is actually multiple funds, multiple budgets, but all the activities combined are focusing on open space management. And then again, we have a group who's really interested in climate, and they want us to pursue a climate action plan. And so there's varying views in the city about how we should do that. So we kind of gave them the choice. Do you want to do a comprehensive climate action plan? Do you want to do a climate strategy, move a little faster, spend a little less on the planning? Or do you not care about this at all and you don't want us to spend the money on it? So we've basically taken an assimilation of all the major issues that we hear come up from interest groups across town and built them into questions into the simulation so that we can get feedback from everyone who takes it on whether or not these issues that we frequently hear about are really important. And if they are, to what level are people willing to fund them and what sacrifices are they willing to make? One of the cool things, Chris, that your team helped us figure out was the Your Ideas thing. So we added this category at the bottom. And when you click on it, it says, click on the red comment button to add your idea. In our town, there's always going to be at least 10 people who say, I can't believe you didn't include this in the survey, or why didn't you ask me about that? And so we are trying to be proactive in dealing with that by giving everyone a space. If you think we missed something, go ahead and put it in here and tell us how much you want to spend on it. So that's the revenue side. I want to take a minute and talk about the.
Hey, just quickly,
sure.
Andrew, you and about all of a sudden, we'd had balancing act simulation for about 7 years, and no one had ever done anything like that. Your ideas category, and then all of a sudden we had about 8 or 10 that did. And so what we've realized is we actually need to make it into a feature. So we've got a suggestion box feature that we'll be implementing probably in the next 6 weeks or so here.
Cool, that's awesome.
We'll let you know as soon as it's ready. It might be ready before for you before you launch.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we were thinking about like, how do we do this? Because we just know there's going to be someone taking it. I can't believe you didn't talk about this. And why aren't you putting a satellite in, up in space for Healdsburg? And it's like, okay, well, here's your line to put that in if that's what you want to see.
That's great.
On the revenue side, this is the other part for me as a finance person that was really hard because, as everyone I think on this call knows, revenues in California are not easy to understand, and there's so many different limitations around what revenues can be raised and what revenues can't. And I really wanted to, in addition to using this as a tool to get feedback on priorities, I did want to also use it as a tool to educate the public on where our constraints are. And as I said on the onset, I wasn't going to try to do that at the fund level, but in terms of revenues in total and what do we actually have control over and where can we generate more money as a city and where we can't was really important to me to articulate here. And so some of the features I liked about this was the ability to lock revenue sources and to be able to control the amounts in which they could increase or decrease. So for example, on sales tax, our Bradley Burns sales tax is going to be what it's going to be based on the economy. We have no ability, the resident doesn't have the ability to give us 2% of the state sales tax instead of 1%. Measure T is our special sales tax measure, and we do have the ability to go back to voters. We can raise that another 1.5% under California law. So I've given them the opportunity to double it and add another, we have another 0.25% we can do, not half. So this gives it another 50% if they go up and down here. But after that, I built in you've reached the max, which these are all little features that are great that are in the tool that really allow people to know, okay, you can do this, but you can't do that. Same thing with property taxes. We lock the city's portion because we don't have any control over that. But property transfer tax, we do have control over if we want to become a charter city and take an initiative to the voters. And so, in that case, I put a little info box here that explains that. It says, hey, here's what property transfer tax is. Here's how much we get now. If we want to become a charter city, which is a whole big change for other reasons, but if we wanted to, we could put a ballot measure out and increase the amount of property transfer tax. And so for each of our revenue sources that I want to highlight, I did that kind of same exercise where I explained what our TOT revenue was, and then I had them go up in 2% increments so that folks can kind of see what it would look like and how much more revenue it would generate. And then for a lot of revenue sources, I locked them because they have no ability to really change them, and nor does the city. And so I wanted to kind of make that clear, like, yeah, I know you need to raise some revenue because you want to do all these things over here, but now you have to figure out where it's going to come from. And I wanted that to be hard for the survey respondents. And so we were fairly intentional about that. And then the last thing I'll just highlight is we're looking at a cannabis measure to allow for retail cannabis measure sales in town. Council has not approved it yet, but they were comfortable with us putting a question on here just to see what the level of support would be for a future voter initiative. So we've done that here where we're kind of asking folks, okay, and it says it nice up here, if we move forward with it, how much would you be comfortable taxing those businesses? And we were very conservative in the amount of revenue, as you can see from the totals, but to give folks a sense of what future revenue we might be able to generate to offset some of their ideas. I think that's it, Chris. I'll stop talking now because I've said a lot. Happy to answer questions.
That's fantastic. And you actually hit upon what I think is like the most important thing about a simulation. You said that you wanted it to be hard for people, hard for residents as they're going through this. And that's what's different than a survey. So a survey, there's a lot of problems with a survey when it comes to budgets. It doesn't take into account, how much things cost. It doesn't take into account trade-offs. It doesn't take into account, the relationship between different spending items. It doesn't take into account the relationship between spending items and revenue items. But what a simulation can do is it can put them, a little bit into your shoes. And we've actually done some surveys of residents as they've come out of doing balancing act. And the number one thing that they say is, that was hard. And that's really what we're trying to impart, especially in this environment right now where a lot of public officials in a lot of instances are just being treated as punching bags when it comes to public engagement. And a lot of you are, put on your game face and you go out and you're like, okay, they can throw tomatoes at me. It's fine. I'll do my job anyway because I'm a public servant. But what this does is it actually puts them in your shoes and asks them to solve the problem with you, giving them some baseline of information and sharing some constraints. So I love what you've done. I'm really, my team was right. This is terrific.
Thank you. I will say once you submit on the back page, I don't know if you can see it, we did add, again, these questions pop up if you don't answer them on the front page, which I also like that people skip through that. But we did add a few demographic questions that we were very thoughtful about writing and including in here.
Yeah.
Mostly just to see if we're capturing really the entire community, or if the 1,000 respondents come in and they're all in English, in the English survey and not the Spanish one, and they're all white men and women above 60, then we know we haven't done a good job. And so I wanted to include these questions so as we track responses and as they start coming in, we can see how we're doing on public outreach and shift as we need to. But I love being able to have these questions and then be able to slice and dice the data on the back end once it starts coming in based on the information. It's great.
That's fantastic. Good. Curious what your colleagues from around the state think. Shannon and Santa Ana, you guys are just beginning. How does some of this strike you? Does it seem useful?
Oh yeah, actually it was. I've been really stuck in terms of how to word some of our revenue categories and our expense categories, because I wanted to, I don't want that finance. I don't want it to sound finance. I want people to understand it. So I was just like writing down like city administration for all, like the city manager's office, city attorneys, finance, all those types of things as well. Again, I love your idea. I'm going to add that as a category as well. So people to kind of have the blank slate. And what we're also hearing from city council right now is like that we haven't had any in-person kind of budget forums or budget hearings because of COVID. And so much of our community is so much socioeconomically disadvantaged. So they want us to go out and go to events and show them how to use like a simple tutorial like this. And so I like the way you've worded things in order to simplify it.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think
I
I'm
want to say our
happy to share the downloads templates with you if you'd like to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Feel our stuff. I spent a lot of time thinking about how we worded things, particularly for the revenues, to try to really simplify the explanation, which is often a really hard explanation or complex one. I'm sure they can still be improved upon. I don't know. Every time I go in here, I find something I want to edit, which is the hard part too.
Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of using the acronyms because a lot of acronyms.
Yeah, that's very generous of you, Andrew, to be so. Once you've built a simulation, you can actually export it into a CSV, and it doesn't transfer every single last nuance of the simulation, but it'll actually allow you to put most of it into an Excel spreadsheet that you can then pull back up into another budget in your account if you're updating next year, or even share it with a friend, I guess. And that's actually one of the things that we're also going to be working on over the next few months. Andrew is creating some templates. So maybe we might seek your permission to borrow a little bit of what you've done to maybe have a special California template. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
I will say, Chris, we haven't started on it yet, but we also did purchase Prioritize for our capital projects. And, I think we've been talking a lot about how to best use that because we know that we're not going to get a lot of votes on the water pipe replacement project next to the parks project. So we're trying to think about how we best frame public facing capital projects and get some feedback on them. But we are going to launch that probably in another month here once we get this one out going pretty well.
Okay, cool, good. Anything else? Shauna, what are you thinking? Anything?
It looks good. My one question was, do those amounts reflect salaries as well as operating costs? Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
I don't have questions. This is all very intuitive and user-friendly looking.
That's great. Well, City of Healdsburg has done a great job. I'm going to go back to my slides now, and I'm just going to show you a couple other things that might inspire you. That was plenty inspiring what Andrew just showed us, but I'm going to show you kind of some of the things that we're seeing in response to some national trends. Just plant some ideas in your mind. So this is kind of what we're seeing, right? Is that it's kind of a roller coaster right now. In 2020, especially those of you who were dependent on sales tax, you were probably looking at a world of hurt. And now it's all kind of come roaring back, especially if you've got some property tax revenue that is part of your mix. But it's also been, offset with ARPA. So, you've got this temporary influx of what for a lot of places is pretty significant dollars. Hold on, I'm going to close my door. I'm working at home and my dog is barking. Hang on just one sec. Uh-oh. My apologies there. And so what we're seeing then is dealing with prioritization. A lot of cities are concerned that the public may think, oh, they've got ARPA money, everything's fine. But we're getting increasing interest from governments that are saying, you know what, post ARPA, we need to be really careful that there is, looming structural deficits. I think a lot of you were in the situation before COVID hit, where you're looking 2 or 3 years out and saying, something's gonna have to give in the next few years here. And I think that is starting to become a reckoning now. And with the way that Andrew framed up both the revenue side with the spending side, it really kind of, frames that question, that really, critical question to what it means to live in a democracy is willingness to pay. You say you want these services, are you willing to pay for it? And that's, I think, going to become much stronger for a lot of places. And then the last point, I've already talked about that a little bit. You just hear every day about public officials just being berated, whether it's housing or it's masks or it's public health or it's all sorts of it's workforce, it's jobs. And what we love about making simulations that can help with public policy is it puts them in your shoes. It asks them not. They can certainly complain if they want to, but more productively, it gives them the opportunity to learn about what you're trying to accomplish, learn what the government needs to, must, legally required to do, and asks them to provide their input about how they would do that. So I want to show you just a couple of examples here. So I've got a few things that I've pulled up. In terms of the, kind of the best of times, worst of times, I'm just going to show you this. This is from the city of Tacoma. This was 2020 when they started out with a $67.2 million deficit. It was just a tough time for them. Their city council wrestled with the idea of whether or not it was, just a viable thing to go out to residents. This was early in the year. It wasn't their proposed budget. It was early in the year when they had the revenue projections to actually ask the public to help solve this problem. And there was some debate about whether or not to do that. Ultimately, they decided to do it, to be, to trust the public to help them be problem solvers. And they had like 6,000 people participate in their simulation. It was really remarkable. And they actually did just that. They helped prioritize things in a really positive way. Andrew had made comment about Prioritize. This is our other tool. We're really excited about this one, and we're finding more new uses for it all the time. This is City of Norfolk, and what they've done, this is their ARPA funding. They've got a pretty big ARPA allocation at 154 million. And this new tool is just super simple. You can go through and you can look at possible projects, like renovate Chrysler Hall. You can select it, and this particular one is $40 million. So it shows you've chosen $40 million, and you now have $114 million left. You can transform the Northside Park. Each of these allows you to go in and sort of understand what the project is. And if you click on more details, they've used this nice little app from Microsoft called Power BI, and they've just made these little visualizations that kind of describe what it is, just so that people can understand and kind of interact with it a little bit. And you can just go through and just kind of say what you want. This is a new feature, Andrew. This might be new since you came on board, where you can now choose categories. So this was a large list, and so if you wanted to just look at certain things like investing in our neighborhoods, you can do that. And then on the back end, you can, or not on the back end, but at the bottom, once you've made your selections, you can go down here and you can decide what the priorities can be. I'm also, let me just mention, I'm going to show you Kenmore, Washington. They've had, my gosh, they've had a huge participation rate. This is not too far from Seattle in Washington State. They have, I think, about $4 million in ARPA funds. But you know what? They didn't say to the public, help us spend all $4 million. They said, you know what, we're actually going to spend, $3 million on things like stormwater and, the non-sexy things, Andrew, that you were talking about. But what they did say was, we've got about $1 million and there's a lot of different things we could spend it on. And so, should we spend it on, a pool program for kids? And so they describe what that looks like. And Then down here, they've got City Hall playground and sports courts. I love this one. If you pull it up and it then shows more details, and they've got a rendering of what it could look like, so people can kind of envision this. And then the idea is that you go through and you've got that $1 million to help prioritize, and then you can go down here and rank order some things. And so the idea, the key thing is here that they're not saying, help us spend all of it. They're just saying, you know what, here's some discretionary. Please help us prioritize how we should spend that. Let's see, some other things I wanted to show you. This is actually the city of Kennewick. It's the same city, but it's a totally different use. This is the one I really wanted to show you because as a lot of you are dealing with structural deficits or expected structural deficits in the next 2 to 5 years, they've got their spending items over here, and they use a lot of our scenario questions and so forth. But I think what's really innovative about what they've done is that they have been identifying possible new revenue sources. And so, based on Washington state law, there's a little bit of capacity to increase the property tax, and they let you look at what that would look like. I think that Washington state, like California, I think you have to have a vote, or at least if you go above a certain max. I'm not sure exactly how that works there. But anyway, a very high need for public involvement. I think that they do have to have a vote if it goes above a certain level. And so they can look at new utility taxes and things like that. So these are the things that people are looking at. And so they're letting people, have some input on what it could look like. Development fees, they're not making that up for something that can be adjusted, and intergovernmental, they're not. Other, I think, yeah, I mean, they're saying, gosh, we could put in some photo enforcement cameras and, send you all a bunch of tickets, and that would, raise $1.3 million. What do you think of that? And I think that's a decent public engagement question as far as I'm concerned. And then there's Roseville, California. Roseville is remarkable. They used our tool for an award-winning campaign called Engage Roseville. And same thing. They were expecting a structural deficit about 3 or 4 years in the future, and they wanted to let their residents know that unless something changes under the current revenue projections, that in 3 years you all are going to help us figure out where to cut about $3 million. And so they put a simulation together, and essentially the task was to look at the various services, adjust service levels, eliminate programs if you wanted, and then help have that cut end up to be about $3 million. What happened was residents went through and they learned about the services, and they said, we kind of like those services. And so then they said back to the city, said, well, is there another alternative? If we want to keep those services, is there another alternative? And obviously in California, you don't have the ability, city council doesn't have the ability to raise taxes on their own. But what city council said was, we could refer a measure to the ballot so that you can decide if you want to increase your own taxes. And so with a vote, I think it was 67%, they passed a half-cent sales tax increase so that they wouldn't have to make those painful cuts of services that people liked. And so I think that was a very positive outcome. Really nice way of sort of trusting residents. And in some ways you don't have a choice because of the way that tax laws are written in California. To come out the other end with a good decision, so that they would actually be paying for the services that they say they valued. I'm also going to just show you, and we can share this around with people, maybe in the post-meeting summary. We have a really nice little case study that has some quotes from the city manager and so forth about what they did. It's just it's a good story. And now I wasn't expecting to talk about this too much, but because many of you raised this, housing is something that has just become a huge issue for us. And in the span of a year, we went from having 0 cities and counties in California using our housing simulator. Our housing simulator didn't exist, to having 30. The Association of Bay Area Governments bought it for 25 of their members, and then another 5 bought it independently on their own. This is City of Cupertino's, and it's just a really nice way of kind of framing the general plan requirement, the RENA requirement that the state allocates to local governments. City of Cupertino needed to find 4,588 housing units. And so over here on the revenue side, we've adapted this significantly, but it's not too radically different. And they just said, you know what, this is what we need to find. This is what the state of California says we need to find. And then you can go over here and you can then say, well, what if, you can look at areas where you want to put it. So you can say, well, what if we put it into Oak Valley? And so if you increase it, each click, it goes up by 92 units. And then it shows correspondingly where in town you're putting it. You can also go the other way and start out this way, and you can click on the map, and then it takes you to the place, and you can take a look at it. And then they put in a maximum in certain places, and so you can see that we've increased in 1 and F. We're looking at adding this to the budget side of the simulation, thinking about possibly doing it for capital projects and things like that. So if anybody has any ideas or thoughts for how that could work, please let us know. Andrew, you mentioned climate action plans. We've got in the works, we've got a template that we'll be developing that could be helpful with climate action plans. We're working with an organization called ICLEI. I can't say what that acronym is for. I think it's a French word, but they've got 300 local governments in the US and 1,700 in the rest of the world. And it's a nonprofit organization that provides support to writing climate action plans. And so what they do is they have a goal. They help a city set a goal for what they want their climate, their greenhouse gas reduction to be at a certain date. And then they've got a sort of a catalog of strategies, like building electric vehicle charging stations, or electrifying buildings, that type of thing, that all have some impact on reducing greenhouse gas. And so this was kind of the prototype, right? It's not the prototype, it was sort of a precursor to it, about how it could work. This is a project that we did with the state of Arizona. And several years back, you might remember the Volkswagen settlement. Volkswagen was required to pay the states a certain amount of money to essentially pay for the pollution that their cars caused that they weren't supposed to, based on their agreements. And so anyway, the way this works is that it's got two indicators. It's got the financial indicator over here that you're familiar with. And then over here, it's got the NOx reductions, nitrous oxides, the type of greenhouse gas, and it describes what this is. And then you can go in here and you can say, what, state of Arizona is proposing that they replace old school buses with new school buses, and they're proposing that they do 344, net cost of $37 million. And you can just kind of look at different scenarios. If you want to save some money, if you want to spend less money on this, you can. And so it increases the money that you have available, but it's decreased your how well you're able to reach your maximum goal. So they had a target of 574 tons of nitrous oxides. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to play with different ways. So instead of replacing old diesel with new diesel, you could replace old diesel with electric. But the problem is that electric school buses are about 3 times the cost of new diesel. And so you don't get quite as much bang per buck. And so it appropriately, kind of allows the public to wrestle with this idea of, should we get the biggest bang per buck in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or should we do something a little bit different and kind of, encourage this growing industry by buying electric school buses, even though it costs 3 times as much. So I think that was actually a really useful one as well. And then the last thing I'm going to show you, and we're from Colorado, and I think a lot of times people say, at least in Colorado, we think of California and Colorado as having some of the most restrictive voter participation rules in terms of passing a tax increase. You really can't have a tax increase in Colorado or California without having a vote of the people. We created this tool called Taxpayer Receipt, and I'll just tell you the quick background on it. The tool was created by the city of Denver, was our prototype back in 2014 when we built Balancing Act, and the CFO was our advisor. And once we got Balancing Act to a place where we thought it could be useful, she said, the other thing I'd like to have is I'd like to have a way to demonstrate to residents how much value they're getting for their taxes. And she said people just don't seem to appreciate, what a good deal, the taxes are. And she'd give the example of going around to civic groups and chambers of commerce and talking to them. And she'd always start out her presentation by saying, how much do you think the city of Denver spends on snow removal each year? And people would typically guess around $200. And then she'd get a big smile on her face and she'd say $12.50. How's that for a deal? And so she kind of wanted to, that how's that for a deal? She kind of wanted to just reinforce that for people, over and over again, that yes, your taxes may seem like a lot, but you get a lot. And so we created Taxpayer Receipt, and it's different than just like slicing up, a dollar bill and saying, 1% goes here and 4% goes there. This actually does an estimate of how much somebody pays. So this is city of Corona down in Southern California. And we asked just a few questions. So, put in, annual income, I'll put in $80,000. And then I'll put in age, I'll put in 45. And what this is doing is a lookup with the consumer expenditure survey that says somebody with this amount of income has X amount of disposable income to buy with goods and services. And then it says, okay, a 45-year-old buys a certain market basket of goods and services. Some of them are self-taxable, some of them are not. And so it just gives you kind of a back of the envelope estimate of how much sales tax somebody's paying. And then down here, do you own a home? You say yes, and you can click over here and go to the assessor's office. But then you can, I'm not sure what a good number would be. I'm going to put in about 600,000. And because of the assessment rate and the assessed value, I never know if that's a good estimate or not. But at any rate, you put this in and then you view a tax receipt. And then it gives you a breakdown of how your tax dollar is broken out. So $348 goes to programs in the city manager's office, $95 are for homeless, and it describes what that is. City manager's office themselves, $97. I think this, I might have made that a little bit high, I'm not sure. But then you can look at library services at $63. City council, $9.26. Your elected officials will like that, so that people know that they really aren't a big cost item, and so forth. Police department is usually the biggest. This, I think I added a property value that was high for the assessment rate. And then down here, you can get a breakdown of how much everything is. And then this takes you right to their budget. I think this is an active link, a live link, and then they can try it for themselves. So anyway, we're just continuously trying to think about some ways that we can continue to provide you tools to get that type of positive interaction, useful interaction. It's not just interaction for its own sake, but it's really trying to, as Andrew said, you're trying to convey to people how hard this is, and we think that's a great thing. So I'm going to stop there. And Andrew, if you have any final comments, please feel
Chris,
free.
can I ask you a question real quick?
Please, absolutely.
Have you heard from any California localities on how we weigh Prop 13 into the taxpayer receipt, especially for the property taxes? Because we've ran a couple of simulations through it, and it doesn't quite look right. And I don't know if Prop 13 has something to do with that.
Well, I don't think it should, but I'm not an expert in Prop 13. Because the way that it works is that you click on the link to the assessor's website and you actually look up the assessed value of your property. And so Prop 13 would impact, I think, what that would look like. But I think if you go to the assessor's office and grab that value directly from them, I don't think it should be impacted by Prop 13. That's my understanding.
No, I think you're right.
Okay.
It probably has more to do with the percentage of property tax revenue that the city actually gets.
Yes.
And not all cities are the same in that manner in California. And
I'll also just say that this is one reason why California cities, I think, really would benefit from having a taxpayer receipt. So there's a city in Silicon Valley that has outrageously high property values, right? And the director of administrative services there is like, people come up to me and they're like, I pay so much in property tax, the streets ought to be paved in gold. And she's like, well, the thing is only 9% of that comes to us, that most of it goes to the schools or the county. And so it's a way of just showing that, even though you do pay a lot in property taxes, that's actually not money that the city can use generally. Usually it's around, 8 to about 13% as far as I can tell. That makes sense, Shannon?
Great, thanks. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Andrew, what were you going to add anything?
No, I said plenty today.
Well, Andrew, I learned a ton from listening to yours, and I really think that you've done a terrific job with building your simulation. And one thing we always offer coaching, whether it's asked for or not, is you might want to on your warnings where you put the caps on the revenue. You can actually customize that message if you want. It doesn't just have to say you've reached your max. It can say something like, you can describe why, it can't be increased, or, that city council doesn't have the authority to do this, or something like that. That's the only thing I saw that I would offer. And then, keep a lookout for our new suggestion box feature. Hopefully, when did you say you're going to launch?
We're going to launch next week. So.
Oh, okay. We probably won't have it by then, but it's coming soon. But I think
okay,
we have.
This will work for us.
Yeah, good. And then we're going to add it to the prioritize tool too. That is the one thing that we found with if I'm sharing stories from around the country, is that in some places, essentially the ARPA funds that have been put on prioritize have been kind of the city manager's wish list. And what we've heard is that some community members are like saying, hey, wait, what about homelessness services? And some of these things that may not have been on the capital plan that the city was thinking about. So we're going to add that same type of feature for prioritize, because we think it's useful. Some of it's not allowed for ARPA expenditures, but that's fine. It's still good to know that people have an interest in doing something with this. But that information will then come back to you as the public official to decide what to do with it. So, and what we're finding is that that suggestion box feature, it's actually allowing for a little bit of iterative conversation where somebody says, there's a lot of people that are really wanting to help local businesses, and so maybe we got to think about an option there. So anyway, it's really been a pleasure to talk with you all. And Andrew, thank you so much for sharing what you're doing. And if you ever want to chat about budget engagement, public engagement, housing, let us know. We're always trying to, as I said, to create these easy to jump into experiences that let people experience how hard your job is. So, all right, thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.